Hi, I'm Hiroki Berrecloth, and you're watching the Permanent Rain Press. Let's get into it.
Hi everyone, it's Chloe with the Permanent Rain Press. Today I'm happy to be joined by Hiroki Berrecloth. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, really excited for this actually.
I'm really excited to chat with you, kind of dive into your background in theater and also talk about a film you were a part of last year, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So starting off though with your background, like what can you share about it in the arts and what sparked that passion in you to pursue it as a career?
Yeah, it kind of began in primary school. I had an incredible teacher, Mrs. Stewart, um, and I was doing sort of, I don't know if you have it in the States, or Canada, but we have sort of acting grade system. You can take exams in acting. They're called lambda grades here. Um, but I was doing sort of lambda grades with Mrs. Stewart, and I just had so much fun. And obviously, we did school plays as well. And I was getting pretty good results on the grading system. And then one day I turned to her and I was like, I think I want to do this for a career. And she didn't laugh, she didn't bat an eye, and she was like, I think you can too. Um, which meant so much at the time. And she also told me that I'll probably have fun doing it. And I think that was it. That was it. That because when I said it out loud myself, I was kind of um, I don't know. It felt like a dream, something quite embarrassing to say out loud. Um, and this was in year six, so I don't know how old I was then, but year six, and um, yeah, she didn't laugh and she said I could do it and I could have fun doing it and that was it. And I'd sort of decided, oh right, this yeah, that makes sense. I can be an actor. Um, which was really exciting and it made me love it more and um I continued training with her for a few years after I left that primary school as well, because I just felt that being with her, and she's an incredible actor, um, was a way to better myself. And yeah, so then I moved on to my secondary school. And unfortunately, my secondary school, which is why I was so glad I had Mrs. Stewart carrying on teaching me, it was very academic focused. It didn't have much investment in the arts. And I started to really hate acting there. Really hated it. Just because it was so ego based. And it wasn't something I was enjoying. So I got very close to quitting acting. Um, but then my mum had signed me up without my knowledge to the National Youth Theatre auditions, which is the National Youth Theatre is a kind of an organization in the UK which kind of helps develop and support young actors and creatives. And um, went into the audition. My mom had signed me up. I didn't know about it, and I was successful. I managed to get in, and it was there then I met obviously so many like-minded actors, and it just felt great again. I was just like, no, the acting that's happening in my secondary school doesn't represent what acting can be for me. So um, I then started kind of, yeah, carried on training outside, but also started um, I joined the Abbey Theatre, which was my local theatre company where I did some shows and but yeah, my mum to thank for keeping that flame alit because it was very close to going out. Um, but yeah, and then Mrs. Stewart as well. She was incredible for me. Yeah.
Well, I have to say kudos to your mother for kind of continuing this path for you. It's always important to find like a safe space for you to kind of hone your skills and that creativity because like you mentioned, like there can be maybe some acting classes out there, but if it's not kind of aligned with, your values and really what you want to say in your work, it can kind of diminish that spark even just temporarily. Did you come from a like artistic family, your background?
Not particularly, no. Although not in my immediate family. So my mum is a Japanese lecturer and teacher, and my dad's a banker. So um, not much artistry within the immediate house, but my uncle, so on my mum's side, he's kind of a digital creator. He works for Nickelodeon, and a digital artist. And my grandma, so my mum's mum, she makes these incredible pieces of clothing that is kind of recycling traditional Japanese materials from like kimonos and yukatas and stuff, and then creating these incredible pieces. For the Hunger Games premiere, I wore one of my grandma's vests because yeah, I wanted to take it with me. Um, and the rest of the outfit was designed by my friend Georgia, who wants to be a fashion designer, and she did an incredible job of pairing the trousers and the sheer shirt with the vest that my grandma made. So yeah, so there's definitely artistry in my family, but yeah, I think it was by chance that I stumbled upon acting myself. Yeah.
Well, you did have their support, which I think is all kind of you can ask for. And it's nice that you carried, you kept it close to home, kind of that outfit you wore to the premiere. You have a theater background, like you were talking about, and what I'm curious, what drew you to this kind of performance and the stage? Because it is very different from, the film and TV world and acting for that.
Yeah. I think my general feeling, and maybe I don't think I had these thoughts fully thought out when I obviously was doing it as a kid. When I was a kid, it was just it was just so much fun being on stage, playing different characters and all of that, and sort of the live part of it made it exciting. Um, Now I think for me, I think theatre is just a really special way of telling a story because it unlike sort of screen with the live aspect of it, it demands the audience to join you on a shared imagination. So it's an exercise in collective imagination. You know, the audience sitting know that what they're watching is fake. I guess it's the same for cinema, but it's to a lesser extent, I think, because you're trying to push for naturalism and you're trying to push for um in a lot of cinema, you're pushing for naturalism. Um, and to get people to buy into those worlds fully. The aim is to iron out all of the you don't want people picking holes at the story. But in theatre, everyone knows, you're in the space, you understand that why is this block here can be a bench and then also I don't know, a desk, and it can transform and be so many different things. So it's really demanding of an audience. It makes the audience work, it makes them try and imagine with you. And I think that's what makes it really difficult for it to be done well and to be done. Um, but I guess because of the difficulty, it's also very exciting, right? It isn't just about your performance, it's more of a collective, and you bring the audience into that much more than um, cinema. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's incredible. And I think I'd love to do more theatre.
And what's really cool is how theater has really kind of evolved, especially like more recently, how stories are told and making it more of, not just what's on stage, but a visual and audio experience. And I hope we're going to talk about a production that you've been a part of last year. I'm not sure if it's the answer to the question, but if not, it isn't, we'll talk about it. Do you have a favorite production that you've been a part of? And if yes, which one and why?
Yeah, it's got to be the Garden of Words. It's got to be. So Garden of Words, for people who don't know, is originally an animated feature film by the director Shinkai Makoto. He then wrote a book that fleshed out that word further, and then the director Alex Rotter, she then decided to create it into a play. So it's kind of gone through three different translations, I guess, in terms of mediums, and also a language translation, obviously. Um, but that made it really exciting.
The Garden of Words,
Yeah,
I wasn't familiar with it until I was reading more about the story, but you starred as Takao. who is, I believe in the manga, is like a 15-year-old. He's a shoemaker. It's a story about loneliness and companionship. So what was it like being a part of this production and working with the talented cast and crew behind the scenes?
Yeah, for sure. So my journey with the Garden of Words started quite early. So um, the original plan was to for this production to be on pre-pandemic, and obviously Corona hit. It all got pushed back for 3 years, I think, and and then when obviously it opened up again, Alex asked me to audition again because by this point, I'd obviously grown up a bit more. 3 years is a lot of time, and I didn't have as much of a baby face as I did 3 years ago. So she asked me to audition. What was really nice is that she brought me in for an audition before opening it up to anybody else. So she gave me the opportunity to, um, you know, have a go at Takao again. And then I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity again. To, and yeah, I think it was really challenging for me because uh, I haven't gone to drama school. So whilst I did sort of learn acting from Mrs. Stewart when I was much younger, I hadn't learned the techniques of breaking down a character. Um, and so going in for so we had a month of rehearsal, but the first couple of weeks I had no idea how to get to my Takao, um, because I just didn't have the tools. And I had a similar feeling during the Hunger Games as well. But it felt more present for the Garden of Words, where I was just struggling. I was learning the lines, we were running the scenes, and I was getting a feel of where I needed to be. Um, but it just felt like he was locked away in a box that I didn't have a key for. And so, what was really amazing about the cast is um, there was a lot of experience there in terms of the rest of the actors, and they'd all gone to drama school, and they all had their way of doing it, their process. And so starting to speak to them and learning, I was being like, hey, is there anything that I could try, is there anything that could work, and discussing with them, and they were really open and really um great at offering me certain tools that I then tried to pick at the lock. And Mark, for example, would give me a tool, and I'd pick at it and didn't quite fit. And then, James would give me a tool and I'd try that. And then I'd make my own way of figuring it out by combining the tools or something like that. And that was really exciting for me. So I think that's why the Garden of Words was so special for me, was it was a massive learning experience and also humbling, and reminded me, and it's what motivated me to continue training. So I've now started commuting to um, Manchester actually for the Manchester School of Acting, which is a class that runs for 5 hours, and it's not built like a drama school. It's just a class that runs each week, and it works more like the American system, which I think I like. Sorry, I know I'm getting off topic. In terms of the kind of the visual and the audio of the production, yeah, it was beautiful. We had projection mapping work happening on the stage. We had puppetry work, um, not giant puppets. It was no, we did have a giant puppet, but we had a crow, which um appears a few times in the film, and we tried to make it a more uh integrated kind of metaphor into the film.
I saw some of it in the rehearsal trailer. You were also doing like a lot of different movement kind of exercises, and I love that you could workshop it with the cast behind the scenes, and not only the movement and where you have to be on stage, but also your character. It seems like everyone was a really big help for that part as well, which is special.
Yeah, I think Alex is an amazing director. I think the way she works is she gives a lot of power to the actors. It was a lot of devised work. It was a lot of, it started with the movement of kind of creating stories with our bodies, and then developing characters off of that. And yeah, she's incredible at giving confidence to actors as well. So I think for a first time director, for me to work like not she's not a first time director. For a director, for my first director to properly work with me and sort of help me. So, you know, throughout that process, I couldn't have asked for a better director. She's um yeah, an incredible person with an incredible vision for things. And I'm really grateful that she trusted me with Takao.
I did read some good reviews for the production, so I hope you get to be a part of something like that again. It's just really cool to see it brought from Japan to the stages of the UK. So hopefully there's more opportunities for different manga, anime, kind of drama films like that in the future. Although you're taking an acting class now, you did graduate from the University of Manchester last year. I believe was it like drama, English literature, or something like that?
Yeah, wow. How did you find that? Okay, that's
T
crazy.
Tell me about your studies. Like, what kind of important lessons did you take away from your time at university the first time around?
Yeah. So, the reason I went into university and not drama school was because I felt that coming out of secondary education, I didn't want a school system of a 9 to 5 essentially for the week. I wanted kind of the freedom that university offers while it being contained within quite a safe bubble, um, of being able to sort of manage your own time. You know, attendance it isn't checked. It's kind of on you to study when you want to study. It's all about um, you know, you making the decisions that you want to make to give you the best opportunities, and to learn what you want to learn. And I think that was important for me, and to meet people from a lot of different backgrounds. Um, I think I think now maybe something drama school could be something I'd be interested in, but it's just that I think being surrounded by just actors, uh, I don't think would have helped me at all in finding my originality in terms of helping me to figure out that actually I want to be telling East Asian stories, hopefully, to be promoting and East Asian stories and I think it also, but just by meeting so many new people, making new friends, I think it's really helped develop my skills at empathy, and I think that is what acting is, right? I think it's it's simply empathy. It's finding a character, and you need empathy to get there. And I think coming from kind of a suburban town, where everyone, you know, there's not too much dissimilarity across the people who live here. Um, yeah, I needed that exposure to different ways of living, and that has massively informed how I now live and um, how I choose to uh, work. And yeah, I think it was really valuable for me as an actor to go there. Um, and English specifically was, I think it's helped me understand storytelling. I think it's helped me understand kind of how useful it is, and how necessary it is for people. Because before cinema, obviously there was theatre from sort of, but before that there was literature, and I think it all comes down to the text. Um, Humans trying to figure out what they want to say, how they want to say it, um, and sort of the skills of unpicking language that I developed during that course are now, yeah, incredibly useful when trying to break down scripts and find why the character does certain things. And um, yeah, it's helped me. It's helped me a lot.
I love how you didn't go to drama school, but you kind of picked up what you needed to from, the majors that you did choose because you mentioned like a lot of perspective. That's kind of made you think more about what's in the character's mind and why they do things. Before we kind of move on to your mixed heritage and cultures, I noticed that there's like a camera in the background and you have all these different kind of like artwork going on. So can you talk a bit about that? Like, were these some of your favorite things growing up? Do you like to take photos now?
Yeah, yeah. So um I just right. So I'm a big manga anime person. So up top we have a couple volumes of One Piece, 20th Century Boys. If you haven't checked out 20th Century Boys, check it out. It's an incredible psychological thriller by Naoki Urasawa. Man, I'm so excited to talk about this. Thank you for asking. I have a lot of Pokemon figures. I've got Cubone and Charmander here. Um, and then more manga here. And yeah, got Magmortar. But yeah, Pokemon was a big thing growing up for me. And manga and anime were a big thing growing up for me as well. I think One Piece in particular is a story that has been necessary for me. Just necessary. It's um probably I would argue is the greatest story ever written by any human ever. Um and I think Oda Eiichiro, the mangaka, the author, he's incredible. It tackles so many important issues, and the world building is insane. But at its core, it's just about chasing your dreams and being kind to people along the way, and doing it with your friends and taking people with you. Um, and I think that's, going back to sort of again like that's kind of something that I really carry with me. So going back to sort of the premiere outfit, I wanted to wear my grandma's clothes. I wanted to bring that with me, and I also wanted to bring Georgia with me on that part of my journey. I know that some actors were looking at, borrowing clothes or lending clothes from certain brands and stuff. And there's a lot of fashion brands that, I love and I'd love to wear it. But I think for when it comes to my personal journey, I think I want to carry people with me, and be carried by other people, like by my friends, by my family. Um, but yeah, One Piece, yeah, it's definitely helped me, especially on like because of the form of manga and anime where it comes out once a week. There's definitely been like horrible weeks that I've had where the fact that there's a new chapter or a new episode at the end of the week has just uh, yeah, it's been yeah, it's kept me going, I guess, in certain points. So yeah, mass amount of respect for that. And in terms of the cameras, yeah, I think it's more of a recent thing. I want to, my interest in kind of was so purely acting for so long. Um, and then through kind of working on sort of the Hunger Games and working on other projects, I realized that actually I want to be telling my own stories. It's awesome to be a part of someone else's vision and to be kind of a cog in that, um, to create a vision, and that's an incredibly rewarding process as well. But um, I wanted to be my own storyteller and kind of mix flip between those two roles. So yeah, so I've been interested in trying to learn photography and learn how to film. Uh, yeah, and so that's just kind of an ongoing process. I'm still very early in that. Um, I think maybe it's a bit arrogant of me to call myself a filmmaker at this point, but we hopefully in the next couple years, that will continue, and I can then start claiming the filmmaker title as well. But yeah,
It's
Groudon's one of my favorites.
fantastic. I love that. Have you been collecting for how many years now? Like all of the manga and the
Oh,
little characters.
you want to hold on? Do you want me to get my collection box? Wait, hold on one second.
Do we
Hold on
have
one
the
second.
time for that? I'm curious how large the collection box is.
That's the collection there. So we've
Oh
got
wow.
we've
They're
got
even
I don't
tumbling
know.
out of the box. There's so many.
Yeah. So we've got a shoebox full of Pokemon figures. But that was something just going back to Japan most years to see my grandparents. Um, they used to sell them in all the konbini, so the convenience stores, and you could just pick up like one at a time. So me and my brother, we both kind of get one, and yeah, it's a really fun collection. Yeah. Sorry, getting back on track.
I think anytime like you have a collection that large, you can see kind of that passion or that shine coming from your eyes. But in terms of One Piece, again, unfortunately, I wasn't aware of it before, but I watched the Netflix adaptation. Were you a fan of that one?
I think they did a really good job at kind of pitching One Piece through a live action lens. I just think that um, I think I think it was really good at getting people interested in One Piece and finding that audience in a way that I don't think other live actions have been successful in doing. Um, for me personally, as someone who is already a diehard fan of One Piece and who loves you can't help but, love the original material more. Um, so it was something, yeah, but I think they did an incredible job. And I'd
I
love to be a
think as
part
a
of it.
faithful
I'd love to be a
fan,
part of
you're just like, please,
it.
Netflix, call me up. I'll do like
Yeah,
any
yeah.
role. I just want to be a part of this. But I think like that's pretty true for anyone who's such a faithful fan. Like you kind of grow up on the original, the source material. So I do think that I mean, like you said, they did capture a really good essence, but hopefully it brings more people to the manga as well and getting immersed in both worlds. You are Japanese and British, so how has your mixed heritage and your culture shaped your identity as a person, but also as an artist?
Uh, as a person, I guess, I don't know. It's just always been there, obviously. My mum grew up to me speak. I grew up speaking Japanese with my mum. Um, was commuting to a Saturday Japanese school. And when I'd go back, obviously I'd see my grandparents, and when I went back as well, my mum would put me. Um, the Japanese schools there are very open to accepting sort of mixed children in for a couple months. And so their summer holidays started later than the British summer holidays. So when I'd go over there in summer, there was a bit of crossover where I was allowed to kind of join their classes. And so from that, I was able to make a few friends who are still my friends. And when I go back, we'll hang out. Um, but yeah, I think it's never something that I've really kind of questioned, or it's just a part of me, I guess. As an artist, I hadn't really considered it for a really long time. So it wasn't it was something that I only began thinking about in, I'd say, the last 4 years, maybe 4 to 5 years, where I kind of started to understand what representation meant, and started questioning why so much of our media um, is so kind of like limited. It's what we have access to, and who gets, shown on screen is so limited. And upon that realization, it it kind of smacks you in the face. It's how did I not see this before? How was I kind of, okay with storytelling being predominantly white? And yeah, but I guess whilst it's also disappointing, it's also very exciting because we're now pushing for change, and um, it's awesome to be a part of this new movement. And this is something, again, I just so I know, but something I'm very grateful for the Garden of Words was that it really put me in touch with other East Asian British creatives. And we have a very supportive community here. So I think I mentioned before we started the call that there's an Instagram account that really celebrates and shouts out any kind of success or casting that happens for sort of British East Asian actors and creatives. And but we have a very supportive community, and a lot of the community showed up to support the Garden of Words play as and and so after the show was wrapped, you end up speaking to all of these people who have had very similar experiences to me. or feel very similarly about where the industry should progress to, and it gets you excited. It gets you because the intent is there, which I think is really cool. Um, and then moving on from that, I think, yeah, it kind of developed into a want into a, I can't just be wanting this. I need to act, and I need this to happen, and I want to help this happen for other people. Um, and I think before then, it's then when I started really appreciating certain actors who are very big figures in the industry. Actors like Steven Yeun, actors like Michelle Yao. Yeah, incredible artists who um, can't imagine how difficult it was for them to break out. And now looking at their and being so inspired by their work. Um, and I think and I guess I just want to hopefully follow that and to help carry that. Um, but yeah, the only thing I think with acting is I think it's a form of passive inspiration. I don't think it's I guess I call it a selfish career. I don't know if that's the right way of calling it, but it feels like my motivations for acting is because I love it. It comes from kind of my want for it. Um, and so kind of reflecting on that, I was just like, no, I want to kind of tell my own stories, create possibly, and the dream is to create my own production company that kind of promotes East Asian storytelling, which I hope to begin with a short film I intend on directing soon. Um, but um, yeah, to create a space that really supports young creatives and young East Asian creatives to inspire them to go into the industry. And I think that's something that's become increasingly more important to me, a way of actively inspiring and actively creating space for um, the community, the voices and faces of our community to be shown.
I think it's great that you are also wanting to create a space now, as even though you say, "Am I a filmmaker?" Yes, you are like a aspiring filmmaker. You mentioned telling your own stories. Like, how have you been able to learn about the writing side? Obviously, with the directing, you've spent some time on sets now. I know you've also been in short films in the past, so maybe you've kind of got a bit of an understanding. But how easily or not easily did the writing side come to you?
I think it came, I think, easier to me than I expected it to. I think, um, yeah, I think I approach it very differently to how um, I think maybe straight writers do. And sorry, let me just straight writers, not in terms of sexuality, but in terms of writers who aren't actors is what I meant. Yeah. Um, I think because what you end up doing as a writer, and what I end up doing as a writer, is essentially trying to do a version of my character breakdown process, but you end up doing it for all the characters. Um, and you really try and understand why they're doing this certain things. I think what really helps me when I go about acting is, your character's in a certain situation, and you have personally as Hiroki, I have a way that if I was in that situation, I would behave in a certain way. But then you look at the script and you see that the character is doing something so different to what you would be doing in that situation. You're just why? Why wouldn't you? Why? You know, and so that question, why, I think is really important. It's like what has made this character decide that in this situation they're doing this? And I think for me, again, my process is still flexible, still building. I'm still figuring it out, but I think that's kind of at its core of just um looking at scenes at the moment and being like, okay, I would behave in this way. Why, like, and then no matter what their decision is, you need to, I think, as an actor, um, like, but like really believe that, and I guess love them for that decision. Um, yeah. Sorry, we got off topic. Um, sorry, would you mind reminding me of
No worries.
the
It was
initial
just
question?
about how easy like the writing process came to you, but
Right.
you kind of did go into detail about how you saw. Obviously, I don't want to spoil the project that you are working on and tell everyone your story, but I think it's exciting that you are work. It's an active work in progress. And what kind of stage are you in that project?
Um, I think, well, we're a little bit before pre-production. We've assembled a lot of the creative team. Some of the creative team have worked on the Garden of Words. Um, so the composer, um, I think I'm looking to audition a couple of the actors as well. Um, but yeah, so we're it's yeah, it's gonna be I guess an East Asian led production. Although that isn't it's not it's not a limiting thing, I think, for the production. I think it's not we have to, fill every role with yeah, it's that's not about that. I think there's kind of two forms of representation where you're kind of very focused on that community, very focused on a very particular story. So if that's a queer story, we're focusing on their journey, specifically looking at, so a show like It's a Sin is focused on a queer experience. But then you have um, representation where you're just kind of seeing people as people, and it's just about place. It's not placing because that feels like it's artificial again, but you're just showing how people how the beautiful diversity and the difference that people hold. And I think that's our intention with our film. In the kind of the production team and the characters we end up picking.
We'll get into The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is your debut feature film role. So, congratulations on that. What can you share about your audition process?
Yeah, so the audition process began actually with an audition for the character Sejanus, played by Josh, who was incredible. Um, I think Sejanus is probably my favorite character in the film as well. I think, um, in my opinion, is the most tragic character because he feels, I think, the closest, almost relevant to kind of how our how kind of society dictates our actions. Someone who sees how unfair it is and in a position of privilege really tries to push it against the wheel and break the wheel, um, but is unable to. I think, yeah, it's just a real tragedy in that I love. Um, but yeah, so I originally auditioned for Janus, um, and then was unsuccessful, but then later they came back to me and were interested in auditioning me for the character of Treech. Um, and then yeah, that went well, like I guess. And yeah, but it was obviously a quick turnaround, and then yeah, out to Germany.
For Treach, do you remember like what kind of dialogue or what you kind of had to do or say in the audition room?
Yeah, so it was it was in the arena, and it was kind of um a few lines of I can't remember specifically. It was a few lines of dialogue and just some kind of fight. Like it was high stakes. You're in the arena, you were fighting, you were throwing a few lines out. It was a very short scene. Um and sort of um after initial self-tape, it was then kind of a Zoom audition with the producers and Francis. Um and yeah, so they got me on my feet, asked me to do, set of star jumps to really get the blood pumping, and then they just kind of called action, and we did the scene. But yeah, it kind of flashed past, I think.
Because you mentioned you initially auditioned for Sejanus, like when you aren't successful in that, what's your kind of mindset after, hearing the news? Do you kind of just put it in the back pocket? And then were you surprised when you kind of got another call back for Treech?
Yeah, so I was really surprised when getting that call back. I think when the initial audition for Sejanus came in, it was very they didn't tell you it was the Hunger Games. It was all kind of hush hush. You were given some sides. We weren't really I wasn't really sure of what I was auditioning for, but there was a little bit of a giveaway. There was, I think, in one of Sejanus's lines, he mentions the word tribute, and I was just like, "Oh, maybe," but I wasn't sure. I imagine there was disappointment because there's always disappointment when there's a role that's kind of written that well and that interesting. When you don't hear back, it kind of sucks. And I think with the Sejanus audition, I felt like I gave everything that I could to that role. I think with self tapes, that's not always the case. I think sometimes it's a real challenge to really invest in in a self-tape audition, depending on kind of and I think that's partly because, like I mentioned before, that I didn't have many tools in breaking into characters. And so with a character like Sejanus, who I kind of immediately kind of connected with, it felt like I could give so much of myself to the process and into building that character. I think with other roles, previously at the time I was auditioning for Sejanus and the Hunger Games, and um, there's been times where I see a role and the disconnect feels like a chasm. Um, and it's only recently through obviously the repeated training now and kind of the new experiences I've had that's working across that chasm has become easier. But yeah, I think yeah, there was of course disappointment. But then so excited to jump on a call with Francis about Treach.
How familiar were you with Suzanne Collins and the Hunger Games franchise before your audition and before being cast? Like, what stood out to you in particular from this world if you were familiar with it?
Yeah, so I read the books as a kid a long time ago. I didn't actually know that Suzanne had released another the prequel novel until the audition. So I read that for the first time shortly after being sort of cast and kind of figuring out what kind of project I was a part of. I was just like, I've got to read this book, so I read it. And obviously I watched the films as a kid. I think a couple of them in the cinemas. Um, but yeah, I think I think it's an incredible franchise. I think it's an incredible story. It's it's yeah, it's just an incredible dystopic world and incredible because it feels so close to our own. I think that's what makes it so um engaging and terrifying and uh tragic is because that world feels so close.
I think that it's a different setting, obviously, but you look at like the overall themes and the messages that go on in the novels and the films, and you're right, it does really kind of hit close to home, and you see what's going on in our world with politics and everything. I'm curious, who was your favorite character from the franchise and why?
And the franchise, uh I really liked, oh my God, I've forgotten their name. Uh I think on a second watch, kind of I hadn't watched the films in a while, pretty much until after I found out I cast, I kind of binged them all. And what I didn't appreciate, I think the first time I watched it when I was a kid, and I was just like, oh, action, fighting, awesome. Was again like the tragic part of it, and I found myself crying and catching fire. Is that the second? That's the second film. Um, with uh, remind me, what's Katniss's younger sister's name?
Primrose.
Primrose. Yeah, the narrative with Primrose is heartbreaking, I think. The fact that a child is now expected to be a war doctor um, is terrifying. Um, so I think quite like similar to my feelings towards Sejanus, I think it's the tragic characters that really attract me. But yeah, I think Prim's narrative in the original stories was awesome. Not was really well executed, and then Sejanus this time around were are probably my standout characters from the franchise. Yeah.
Really good picks. And with Prim not only becoming, the medic doctor, but also having to, when you look at their family, like support the mother as well, who was also kind of dealing with a lot in the narrative. We don't know much about Treech from District 7, so I was curious, did you create any kind of backstory for your character to help define him and his motivations?
Yeah, so I think more than backstory, I think it was I guess this fits under back more than backstory, it was kind of relationships. So what needed to figure out first was my relationship with Lamina. Um and so I kind of dialed strongly into that. And then I also wanted to focus on what I was leaving behind, who I was leaving behind. Um and so that kind of ended up like fixing around a mother for Treech. And so in, for example, the reaping, and I imagined the mother as being very strict, very kind of, yeah, the household would have been a matriarch, and there was so much love from her, but again, very strict. And I think kind of that developed within Treech and siblings this idea of kind of this world doesn't give you anything. You've got to work hard. And you've got to, and I think it was during the reaping shot, I imagine seeing my mother or Treech's mother, and um, kind of realizing that, yeah, Treech has to make it home. He has to make it home. And I think that kind of, it's that motivation that led him to create the alliance with the pack as well, because all that mattered, I think, for him was, yeah, just as all the tributes, I think, um was just getting home, and it was trying to make the choice in that moment of what would give me the biggest chance of getting home, and alliance with three other stronger or more um aggressive characters um would have definitely upped Treach's chances. Yeah, and then with Lamina, it's they're a similar age. They grew up together. I think it's not the case that they had a friendship or there was romantic relations or anything. There was nothing like that to add to the relationship. It was just that she was home, like a part of home, and was the only thing that wasn't alien to Treach coming into the capital, coming in to fight in the arena. Um, was that she was a reminder that there was a home, that there was somewhere to go back to. Um, and I think definitely the case that they saw each other about, but it's I always imagined Treach was working quite early, like was part of the lumber industry very early, and um, wasn't in education of much sort beforehand, and was very quickly helping around. Um, and so it was, familiar of who Lamina was, but not that there was kind of a friendship or connection there.
I love hearing about how you kind of form these relationships because we'll just state for the record, like these are non-canon ideas, but I think
Yeah.
that as an actor it's important for you to in order to get into his mind, and it kind of informs some of his attitudes and maybe some of the emotions we see on screen creating this story. So you mentioned that you kind of imagined him maybe with some siblings and a mother, so a father was not in the picture.
Yeah, I think so. I never really consider. I don't know why I never considered a father. But it just wasn't there. Maybe I was inspired by the original Hunger Games and with Katniss being fatherless. um, subconsciously. Um, but yeah, I focused on a relationship with a mother, a priority to kind of help the family. I never thought Treech was the eldest. He didn't have the responsibility as like the older brother to kind of help with the eldest sibling to help kind of keep the family together. In my mind, he was a middle child, um, was kind of overlooked, but kind of quietly went about his business.
In terms of, I can kind of maybe glance a bit kind of that working class. We didn't see District 7 in the film, but from the source material, like you mentioned, we know the district provides lumber and paper to the capital. So did you consider the impact of the district and his upbringing in 7 and how it shaped who Treach was? Like we hear the lumberjack nickname in the movie. So did you kind of think about how that tied in? You mentioned maybe he started working at a young age.
I think with the lumberjack thing, I feel like it's kind of a title that was very quickly like kind of given to him, but it was kind of built on the fact that he had a good physique in terms of working in kind of cutting down lumber, working in that carrying lumber and working with that. Um, you develop that kind of that strength, and I think that's what you know gave Treach the opportunity for an offer to join the pack. Um, yeah, it's I think it's also something that Treach buyed into more as kind of a need to survive. Um, I don't think Treach is a naturally very violent character, um, but kind of having this initial kind of people perceiving or other tributes perceiving him as kind of a strong kind of axe wielder was definitely something that he felt would kind of increase his chances of survival. He kind of played into that more. Um, and I imagine kind of exaggerated his strength and his stories to the pack um, when they were talking.
It's one of those situations where you do what you need to do to keep yourself alive. What stunt and martial arts training did you have to undergo, and did it include learning how to properly like hold and wield that axe?
Yeah, so we had like a month beforehand, which was working with the stunt team who are incredible, um, and working kind of with, in particular for me, was Felix, obviously, who was my stunt double, Ice, who plays High, and Samir, who plays Soul. Those three in particular really took me under their wing in terms of allowing me to repeatedly like run through the choreo over and over again. But I found it really exciting. I found I loved doing it. It was such a nice way of physically getting into the character as well. Um, Especially because coming into this project, again, it was kind of a first feature film. I was nervous. I was, yeah, anxious to say the least. And there was obviously a strong imposter syndrome. Um, and so coming in and then just meeting the stunt team and spending a month with them and the other tributes really helped settle all of those nerves. Because by the end of it, we had for a month or so we'd sweated and hung out, and immediately all that pressure was 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 gone. It was we'd been we were next to each other, sweaty and ugly and smelly, and it just really helped. So I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to do that. What was crazy was because we were filming in summer, and although we were inside, the costume department had a nightmare because every time we'd go back for a fitting, all of us tributes had like lost another inch around the waist, or we were just sweating so much and we were losing so much weight. I've never been fitter. Um, but that kind of all the main focus of all of that stunt training was the initial countdown and the battle royale that initiates the kind of the Hunger Games. So what happened there? The stunt team were there a month before, already kind of choreographing it together as a team. And then when the actors arrived, they'd already choreographed it, and Felix, who was my stunt double was in charge of then teaching me how to run his path essentially. Um, but in terms of all the stunts, yeah, it was pretty much all ourselves, all the actors, because um, yeah, obviously it's very early in the Hunger Games. It's only the 10th Hunger Games, so there's no celebrity, there's no kind of none of the tributes are training to be a part of the Hunger Games like they are in from like District 1 and District 2 in the later games. And so being a bit rough around the edges, not really understanding how to fight, how to get none of us are fighters. We're just kids. The tributes were just kids who are thrown in the arena with no real fighting training, no real fighting skill, which meant, yeah, Felix was often complaining to me about how bored he was because he didn't get to do much. Um, I think from recall from the film, I think the only moment where the stunt where Felix was used was in that tumble into the zoo, um, when the truck lifts and they all fall out. That was the stunt team because, yeah, as actors, we would have definitely hurt ourselves. But they taught us our lines to run, how we should do it, and yeah, they were great with us. And yeah, big shout out to Ice, Felix, and Samir in particular because they were great. Yeah.
And it's really cool to learn from people with so much experience and the choreography. I like that you mentioned that because sometimes we have to remember this is only the 10th games, no fanfare, no additional training for the tribute. So they come in as is. So you mentioned like the rough around the edges, and that's also where Treech could play into his maybe a bit more strength that he had in some of the other tributes. With the axe, how heavy or light was it to hold?
Right. So it was interesting. We had like a few different types of the axe. So we had um they made a proper axe made of wood and steel that was really, really heavy. That just gave me the feel of how much this would weigh and how difficult it would be to wield. Um, so that was great. And then we had another version of it, which was a bit lighter, still had some weight, but it was kind of made of, I want to say like a rubber with a wooden handle. The blade was rubber. Um, and that was kind of used in all of the running scenes and all the scenes where I'm not slashing at someone, essentially. And then we had a version where it was just a rubber stick without a blade and with a CGI strip so they could add the blade in post. And that weighed like, I don't know, 3 grams. It weighed nothing. You could throw it like 100 meters in the air. It was so light. But that was kind of what you were wield like. So for instance, in that scene where I'm fighting against Rachel, Lucy Gray, that was the little rubber thing because they did not want me hitting Rachel with anything that was heavy or sharp or anything that could hurt her. That wasn't happening. So I had a little rubber stick around that length maybe, and then they CGI'd the rest of it. But then it was really difficult because it was so light compared to the other axes that again, you had to then try and convincingly throw like wield the axe as if it still had that weight, even though you could throw it so far. Um, but yeah, no, all of that was really interesting to me. Obviously, again, first time doing any of this. Um, so it was just exciting to learn. And with Rachel was that that was I think that was one of the first things we shot. And Rachel didn't have that month of training. She was filming Snow White, and so it was a very quick turnaround for her. Um, So I had a lot of practice with Silky, who was Rachel's stunt double, and she was incredible. And then Rachel came on set, and we hadn't kind of developed a rapport yet. We hadn't become, friends or close or at all, or had any kind of experience working with each other. So yeah, that was quite nerve-wracking. It was way more nerve-wracking to try and go all out against Rachel, even with the rubber stubby. So I'm glad I wasn't wielding the full thing. But yeah.
It's a bit of like a mental psychology there, then like holding that stick and being like, okay, how easy or like hard is it supposed to be for me to wave this thing around? So a bit of movie magic there. How was that sequence to film and learn the choreography for? Because you mentioned working a lot with Rachel's stunt double, but for you, how do you kind of create that intensity, not only being mindful of wielding the stick that the blade will be added, but just in terms of the weight of that moment, because it was like a big kind of moment for Treech fighting wise.
Yeah. I think it was that opening sort of the countdown into that initial fight was it was just amazing. It was amazing to film. And I think it was particularly amazing because of the set. The set and the set design was incredible. So where we were filming it in the Centennial Hall in Poland in Wrocław. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Wroclaw, Wrocław. But it's an incredible building. And so the art department then got in there and had like built additional walls and cleared out the space and kind of created the cornucopia in the center. There was very little green screen. So when you stepped into the place, you were blown away already. Like half of the work felt like it was done because you step into set and obviously again, this being my first set, I was just like, wow, this is terrifying and incredible all at the same time. And I imagine those are the similar emotions to Treach coming into the space. It's, coming from a district that definitely weren't buildings like this and the 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 kind of the hall and coming in and seeing the spaces was incredible. And then in terms of the intensity, um, I think it was a lot of work was done with kind of Steve, the stunt director, stunt coordinator. But we began by running the entire sequence at like half speed and then 75 and increasing intensity. And when everyone is just committed, so it felt like every single take, everyone was doing everything. So whether it was kind of on like Dill or whether it was on Coral or whatever, everyone is still around you committed to their fight, their line, their narrative, and there was so much more fighting in that scene that wasn't covered. Because we were kind of obviously focused on Rachel's perspective as the principal character, but there's so many other fights that were happening just kind of, in your peripheral vision or happening elsewhere. Um, because it was just kind of an orchestrator and they just said go and we just run it again and again and again. That you couldn't help but have that intensity there because it really did feel like at that point you were like fighting really hard to stay survive. Yeah, I hope that answers your question there.
For sure. And like you mentioned in your peripheral, you see other people going at it. And so that kind of keeps
Yeah.
you on your toes as well. You're like, okay, I gotta match that level. Which was your favorite scene to film and why? Like, was that one your favorite scene, or do you have another one that you were a part of?
I think that one, but in terms of I think also um when Lamina's fighting Coral and Mizzen up on the arch, that was definitely a highlight for me. Not in terms of my performance. I was just it was I was yeah, again blown away by the work of the other actors. Because there was a lot of takes of that. And um I tried to help as best as I could because I was an eye line for Lamina. So I was kind of committed to making sure that my performance was giving her enough that she could, do that scene. But I think that moment is really important for Treach as well because he's picked his side. He's decided to go against his district. And I think then seeing Lamina die, I think that's the realization of from Treach that he can't go home anymore. There is no way that I think home would accept him, even under the kind of that sort of situation where, your mother or someone would tell you just, do whatever it takes to go home. It feels like in his mind, do anything except betray your home. I can't imagine Treech's mum accepting Treech back, even if he did make it back. Um, Having seen that and not trying to prevent that from happening. I think in another world where the pack didn't go after Lamina and someone else got to Lamina before the pack and Treech wasn't directly involved in the attack on Lamina, I think the tactic of working with the pack would have worked really well. Um, and would have kind of he could have come home and if he was successful as a winner, victor, he could have come home and still be accepted by the community. But his direct involvement in the death of Lamina meant that, yeah, with her death, home also died. Um, and yeah, there was an additional scene later that didn't make it into the film, but it was a scene straight after Tanner gets taken out by Coral, and at that point, Treech blows up. He's kind of had enough, and he tries to confront or have a go at Coral, at Mackenzie's character, only to find that Mizen's knife is immediately at his neck, and it's not an option. Um, and I think we didn't get to see it in the film, but for me that was a really key point in completing Treach's arc. For me as an actor trying to figure out the process because um, yeah, it felt like obviously that happened after Lamina's death, and it kind of all built up this kind of resentment of the part, his role in it, and the people he was now having to kind of work together with. It was, and then only to find that Tanner, who was the only other pack member who wasn't directly involved, like directly involved, he was stood underneath the arch with Treech, to see him being taken out by a District 4 alliance. Was that was yeah, a District 4, like the two tributes from the fishing district. Yeah, he confronts Coral and but then can't can't do anything about it. And I think um it was yeah, it was an important moment for Treach, I think. That I wish made it into the film, but what can you do?
I wanted to go back a bit to when he's standing under the arch and watching Lamina's death, because there is that moment where she gets stabbed the first time in the back by Coral, and she looks down at Treach. Like it is a subtle moment, but you mentioned kind of being in the eye line. Take me through, that moment for you, and then because you kind of have to do it in your facial expression, but you can kind of sense that guilt and that shame.
Yeah, yeah. I think that moment was I think the most it was such a, I think that might have been the only shot I had to film that day or something like that. And it was the most exhausting. I was the most exhausted that I'd been across any of the days of shooting coming out of that day of filming. Um, because um I came away and kind of the emotions there is that the guilt and the resentment and self-hatred was so powerful that I was very quiet on set. Um, I didn't get the sense from Irene's performance that there was much blame. From my perspective, again, maybe different audiences took it in different, but watching Irene's performance, it didn't feel like, yeah, it didn't, and I think that made it worse for Treach. It made it the fact that there wasn't this kind of that she was still who she was from before the games, that she was still Lamina from District 7. But what the games had done to Treach was something very different and had um, changed who he was in a way that he had no control of over. Yeah, so I think for me that look from Irene, she's an incredible actor. But yeah, it was definitely tough, I guess.
Take me through the Capitol Zoo scene where Brandy kills Arachne and then is killed by the peacekeepers because we see Treech stand up and he watches it happen. So how intense was that sequence to film in that enclosed space?
Yeah. It's strange because it you used the word enclosed, but it wasn't. It was kind of a built set outside in this massive park in Berlin. And it was again set design did incredible, like it was beautiful work. Um that moment there I think is for Treach. I remember making the choice that he enjoyed that moment. He enjoyed the confidence that Brandy had that he didn't in order to try and fight back against the capital. It felt like a moment where he was reminded that the people in this cage weren't his enemies. It's the people outside of the cage. Um, and then only to then see Brandy's defiance shot down. It's actually quite similar, in my opinion, to Sejanus's arc. That kind of um, you get forced to fight against the people that you didn't want to fight against. Um, and those who try and do otherwise get taken out. So I think there's obviously that moment of kind of of pride. I think Treach felt pride that he could be, whilst not direct, whilst he isn't Brandy, to be connected in some way and feel proud of the fact that he's part of this group of people who for that action. But then to only see Brandy then take like blitzed by the peacekeepers, yeah. And I think it also reminds it's a moment where I think for a lot of tributes, it tells you what you need to do to survive the games. Um that I think going into the games before that Zoom moment, none of the tributes have shown what they're capable of. You don't have like in the later games where um, they have the kind of the training or the point system which awards them like how likely they are to like do well in the games or show off their skills or any of that. Um, so there, yeah, to see that the viciousness that came from Brandy, I think is a wake up call for a lot of the tributes where it's like, no, like I, you can't just be yourself. You can't, you've got to really find a fight that you haven't ever had to use before.
You mentioned a bit about how you saw Treech and Lamina's relationship. Did you and Irene kind of ever discuss your character's relationship? Like, do you know if you were on the same page, or do you think you kind of both saw it like kind of personally and individually and go from that?
Think there was definitely like a similarity we discussed a little bit, but I think in enough to kind of uh make sure that we were believably from the same place, if that makes sense, or could appear on scene on camera um as characters who are familiar to each other. Um there's yeah, I think yeah. So in that way, for sure we discussed little things. I but in terms of the more personal feelings towards each other's characters, we kept that to ourselves. And I think you would. I think I mean even with people that, colleagues at work or whatever, people aren't very honest people. I guess. You're not telling the other person exactly how you feel about them in the same, so that there is no real reason for them as characters within a film or a TV show or whatever to do something that those characters would never do or people don't do. Um, there was an understanding of we kind of built out what we expected of District 7 together, where we came from. Um, the fact that there was kind of a sense of familiarity, but there wasn't, an established friendship going into the games or kind of but yeah, there was enough that we felt like we were from the same place, but not trying to figure out again those personal things.
And I do think there's a lot of truth to that because like you mentioned, you don't bear all to people and it's something that you're going through that lived experience as a character. So it's something that just kind of informs you and what you do. Later, Treech asks Coral if he could be the one to take Lucy Gray out. Do you think he had a personal vendetta against Lucy Gray after his failed attempt earlier? Like, did he see her as a legitimate threat, or did he think she would be easier to take out?
Yeah, not a personal vendetta for sure. I don't think it was that. I think it was the need that he was the only member of the pack who I don't think hadn't managed to take a kill in a one-on-one situation before that moment. And I think naturally there's that pressure that if the pack are going to keep you around, you've got to prove that you're worth keeping around. And so it was definitely there was, and I think all the tributes assumed that Lucy Gray was someone who wouldn't put up much of a fight. And so it was, I think, more of an the intention there for Treach, I think, was more to impress his other pack members and to secure his place within that group.
So when they corner her, and then later they're attacked by the drones, and there's a little bit of friendly fire because we can see Treach kind of deflect a drone with his axe and it hits Coral, and then he gets hit and they both kind of fall down. And I know that the drones were added after the fact. So similar to like the axe wielding, how did you create that energy and intensity in that moment?
Um, yeah, so that took so during our month of training, we choreographed that as well. Or we were taught the choreography. I wasn't involved in the choreographing. But Steve, our stunt director, he was kind of in charge of calling it. So we understood exactly where the drones would be coming from. And then it was more he'd be shouting out numbers, and the numbers referred to specific drones. And when and we'd each have our own kind of actions towards where we'd move and um, all of that. Yeah. Um, but that was really fun for me. I really enjoyed that, especially because when the drone comes back and hits me on the chest, um, I did a lot of full practice for that. It was a lot of kind of I was really trying to get as much airtime as I could before landing flat on my back, without hurting myself as well. So that it took a lot of time. So I took time during kind of that month beforehand to kind of because during that month we had the obviously we had the choreography as a group, but there was a lot of time to kind of work on individual things that we wanted to do. And for that, it was kind of a lot of full practice, a lot of kind of practicing to like because I wanted to really feel that impact and then crash onto the floor. Yeah, I remember on the take that was I think I maybe it wasn't the take that was used, but the take that I feel like was used was one where I got hit and then it really hurt landing. I just landed and it just took the wind out of my chest and but yeah, it was great. Um yeah, again, the space offered a lot of intensity.
Was the first time you saw the drones added at the premiere seeing the film for the first time, or did you get any sneak peeks prior?
Oh yeah, we'd seen the design of the drones. So obviously so we'd complete drones, but we also had like the drones after they'd like smashed into the ground and they were kind of all broken into bits. So we got to see what they were like as well. We got to pick them up as well, and we kind of realized there was quite a lot of weight to it again. Yeah, the kind of the props department did an awesome job of giving us a real sense of what all the objects and all the props really would feel like and how much it would, whether it was the axe, how hard it would be to swing it, or whether it was a drone and how much impact that would actually take upon your chest. But yeah, no, I had a lot of fun with all the action stuff. It was a lot of fun.
I mean, looking at it, it looked like some pretty rusty, malfunctioning metal. Didn't look too safe to be getting smacked around with that, especially in the chest. She just spent more time with the pack. A lot of this obviously happens off screen, but what do you think he kind of grew to learn and understand about Coral in particular and how it unsettled him? Because, like you mentioned in the scene that got cut that we don't see, he was going after Coral in particular.
Yeah, I think yeah, Coral's a scary character. I think also what was quite scary about Coral was that she was able to keep her alliance with Mizzen. Um, and I think Coral seemed to understand the games and what she'd have to do to survive more so than a lot of the other characters. Um, there was definitely moments I think that didn't make it in where Mackenzie did an incredible job of showing um the human behind Coral. She comes across as kind of this very vicious um killer essentially. Um, but again, for her performance, she did an incredible job of like making them human and making like this again isn't something that Coral ever thought she'd end up having to do and never trained for. Um, yeah, so I think Coral and Mizzen together threatened Treech in a few ways. Obviously, in terms of how prepared they were to take it that extra mile, I think. But also in their unity, there was a strength there that Treech wasn't capable of, because he didn't keep with Lamina. Um, and that in a sense, Coral and Mizzen would be the like retain a part of themselves that Treech had lost because even going to these lengths of becoming killers, at least they were doing it together and had a home together and had a loyalty there.
And then
So
watching Tanner go out was probably like that last kind of straw for him at that time. You talked a bit about the arena set that you filmed at. So between when you first went in and then after the rebel bombing, like how much of a contrast was that to see? Was it this exact same set where they added all of the like falling rubble and the debris?
yeah, so we started with post explosion, post rebel attack. So the cornucopia was there, and that was because of the schedule. So we had the tributes were there first, and then the mentors came later. So we filmed all the stuff that kind of just had the tributes first, and so obviously that was mostly the games, and so it was post rebel bombing. Um, I guess the only thing I really had to say about that was it was the same space. It was just a lot less dust. Um, there was so much dust in the air, and so much kind of like rubble that was kind of put into the space post explosion, and it just meant it was really slippy as well. Like Kyo, who plays Tanner, he was getting caught on his costume constantly and was just like sprawling. I remember I remember the first time when one of the first scenes we shots we did was kind of chasing after Tom, Carolina Snow, and Sejanus when they'd entered the arena. First take, I'm running, I trip over the kind of the barriers and take out Coral. There was a lot of falling, there was a lot of slipping beforehand. Then it all got cleaned up and we were just kind of walking around the space and it still had that scale, it still felt epic. Um, but yeah, there was kind of no more falling, no more slipping. So that part of it got taken out of the production process, which is a shame because that was fun. Um, yeah.
A bit of a learning curve for you. I'm sure you're so used to it now, just like learning how to fall without actually hurting yourself. I'm sure it's kind of like that fall and roll, maybe maneuver that you have to do. In the film, Treat reaches his end due to the rat poison instead of the snake mutt from the novels, but both at Lucy Gray's hands. Were you satisfied with how you said goodbye to your character?
Um, yeah, yeah. It's strange because obviously it's not shot chronologically. So after that scene, there was still a lot more shooting to do. For instance, all the zoo stuff. So it wasn't kind of a goodbye between me and the character at that point. Was I satisfied with the death? I think it was um again, I think that that first coming onto set and seeing the scale of it and everything and seeing everyone act, and it was it was really exciting, but it was really overwhelming. And I kind of wish um that I was brave enough at the time to make more choices. Um, I think one that I had in retrospect, specifically about that moment, was that upon getting poisoned, um, I think I should have had another go at trying to bring Coral down. Um, I think Treech could have taken that moment, having been poisoned, feeling it, feeling something was wrong, um, and taken it to Coral, um, as kind of a really pathetic attempt at clawing his way back to kind of some sort of redemption, or to like redeem himself, or to on Lamina's behalf take vengeance. At the same time, I kind of feel that in that moment, Treach is kind of panicking and is kind of so focused on himself that yeah, maybe there wasn't an option there. But then kind of obviously Vipsania's lines like, did Coral do something? I think there was definitely an opportunity there to maybe have taken it to Coral. Um, but that would have made Treach a more likable character, and for in the end, for I guess an audience perspective. And I don't know if that was right. I don't think every character deserves a redemption. I think that's kind of one of the strong messages of the Hunger Games as well, is that um, no one got to go out on their terms really, um, except I would say Dimitri's character, who obviously was an exception. But yeah,
I think it's easy to kind of look back after the fact and maybe kind of say, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done this. But I thought that it did play out. You did have that dramatic fall, like you mentioned. No one knows what happens to him at that point, but that definitely would have kind of rewrote what ended up happening to Coral. I was disappointed in the zoo scene that we didn't get to see you juggling walnuts. I'm not sure if that was ever something that was discussed or you were looking forward to, or what happened with that moment.
yeah, I saw I saw that. I read that in the script and I was like, okay. And I in the and sorry, not in the script, in the book. And I was like, okay, I better start learning to juggle. Um, I couldn't get past three. I couldn't get past three objects of like juggling. But I also don't think it particularly needed it. Um, I think to keeping in order to kind of keep the pacing up, it made sense to sort of carry through the zoo quite quickly. Um, and yeah, I think for for Treach to have become comfortable enough in the zoo space to then start juggling for the crowds, and um it wouldn't have happened in just the 1 or 2 days that was shown on screen. I think um in the book they spend longer in the zoo, where they're observed by the capital for a much longer period of time. They're kind of kept as prisoners for a longer period of time. And so obviously the longer you spend in a space, the more familiar you get, the more kind of relaxed you get. And even though it's a horrible position to be in, that kind of familiarity then gives you the confidence to then do stuff for the crowd. Yeah. And then the moment with Arachne happens. So yeah.
After that, it's like you don't think he's just going to grab walnuts and start juggling. Like it
No,
doesn't work that way for the
it's not
mindset.
the yeah, it's not really the right moment
I can
to
only
start
imagine
juggling.
he's like, okay, now I need to start getting at working the crowds. It's like, no, it doesn't make
Yeah, yeah,
sense
yeah.
for the
Let
arcs
me
and
be
stuff.
let me be the comic relief for the scene. No, it's
Outside of the games and the like arena, what was your favorite scene in the movie and why? So one that you were not a part of and Treach was not in.
um I have to say I was really impressed with Tom's moments in the forest. like Snow's moments in the forest after Rachel had um betrayed him. Um, yeah, wasn't a part of that. And again, it's really interesting because again, it being a first experience, there's so much learning to do. You watch performances happen um on set, and because you know you're in the space, they're so far away, you don't get to see that much. And then seeing it all on the screen, you're just like, wow, they've done an incredible job. But that moment with Snow, that was impressive to me. That stood out to me.
What was your experience like working with your director, Francis Lawrence? Like, did you have discussions with or interactions with Francis? I know you mentioned kind of being comfortable coming to him with ideas, and even any other members of the creative team.
I think yeah. So with Francis, he gave us a lot of kind of freedom to try stuff, which again was amazing for a lot of us who were kind of it was that a lot of us it was obviously our first feature job and first time sort of being in a space like that, and to have a director who understood that his casting decisions have casted inexperience, um, and not putting like a load of pressure on them to kind of perform in a certain way, but to allow those kind of to trust the actors was something that I found really freeing, and is definitely coming to you know my desire to go on to direct um was definitely like a learning experience there where you know being able to really trust your talent, your team, your creatives. It's yeah, it was just really awesome to see. At the same time, there was very specific moments where he'd want something very specific. And I think because he gave you the space in other moments, you listened to him when he gave you the note, um, which was really great. And with the rest of the team, Chris, the AD, um, one of the loveliest guys I've ever met. Um, and yeah, just incredible at holding that operation together and at the same time being so personable. Haiti, she was really helpful for me. Um, Halfway through the process, again, still with that syndrome, still not understanding why I was there or whether I was doing a great job, or doing, you know, um, she took me to one side and we had a very honest conversation, um, and so very grateful to her. And then Nina as well, one producer, she was on set and um, she was very happy to just kind of kick it and talk about stuff that wasn't about the film, which was lovely. And to kind of be in an environment which I thought going in would be very kind of strict and yeah, to be offered that freedom was really nice.
It's wonderful that you were a part of a project like this because there's so many cast members. Sometimes you maybe think, oh, it's going to be impersonal, maybe you're not going to get space, maybe people won't kind of be there for you, but it sounds like people really cared, like you mentioned, even if you're dealing with, some personal kind of thoughts. And then you said imposter syndrome, which they kind of are there to listen and reassure you. And I feel like, I mean, hopefully you took that away from this film, that you do deserve and you do belong in the industry. What can you say about the performances of your leads, Rachel and Tom, and how they embodied their characters, but also carried themselves as leaders on and off set?
Um, I think I'll speak more about them as people rather than how they went about their performance per se. I don't think I'm I don't think I can comment on people's performances. I don't think that's fair. Um, but in terms of people, starting with Rachel, again, the fact that she came from another production and was immediately dropped into this production, um, and then feeling how exhausted I was once we wrapped filming, and then and I wasn't even obviously I wasn't even a lead. I wasn't even close to one. But the fact that she just carried Snow White obviously as the lead and had been dropped into this and then was expected, the stamina and the endurance and the kind of the commitment was astonishing for me. It was really a wake up call on where I need to be mentally, how I need to be really um how I really need to be like look after both myself physically, emotionally, and mentally in order to have any longevity in this career. I think that's one of the things that really impressed me about Rachel, and at the same time still being able to be personable and open themselves up to getting to know other people when she didn't have to. No one had to obviously socialize with anyone, but the fact that she was willing to, grab dinner, get to know us, first timers especially, was really nice. And then Tom, similar, his stamina is insane. Um, and to be carrying this production on his back and then to be at ease with everyone else. And again, I think both those people I can take a lot from both of them in terms of, and I have taken a lot from both of them and how I should conduct myself on set, um, when I should choose to isolate myself before going into a particularly, heavy scene or whatever, and to pick my moments in setting boundaries, but also allowing in the right moments to be open and get to know people. I think, yeah, because I think making a film a success is very important, but I think you've got to enjoy what you do, and part of that is connecting with other people and connecting with new people. And I don't think I would ever want to be an actor who is just so focused on themselves that they don't care about any other part of production.
Do you still keep in touch with a lot of the cast? Like I know you spent it was 4 months and 2 weeks, I think you said, in Germany for filming. So, what are some of your favorite memories? I know I saw a lot of behind the scenes photos, grabbing group dinners and meals and things like that.
Yeah, it felt like summer camp. It felt like summer camp. It was a lot of obviously a lot of young people um in a city that wasn't theirs and just growing familiar to it, exploring a lot of different parts of cities, um, learning where the best spot is to grab this type of food or that type of food, and doing it together. Um, it was a lot of fun. I think amongst the tributes, we were very from the older tributes and Knox, Sophia, Cooper, and oh my God, she's gonna beat me up for Luna. Oh my God, she's gonna beat me up. Um, Luna, by the way, is an incredible person. She's so confident. I don't know how at the time I think she was 12 or 13. I don't know how kids are being built like that these days, but that's insane. I didn't have the confidence back then, and with Knox as well. Yeah. But yeah, with all of us, we just hung out a lot and we did different things together. I think one of the highlights in terms of an experience I didn't think I'd ever be have the opportunity to do was whilst we were in Poland. A few of us took the time on a weekend to go visit Auschwitz, um, and that was something that I've always been curious about and wanted to visit and um, yeah, go over there. But it wasn't something I didn't. I probably would have never have gone to Poland had I not gone to Poland with this production. It wasn't on the top of the travel list, I guess. And so to have the opportunity to go and visit that was definitely an experience that I'll never forget. Um, and then in terms of the more fun stuff, just on our days off, kind of exploring the city, um, yeah, shopping, grabbing food, becoming friends and just hanging out, and it was really lovely. And to answer your question, I still stay in contact with quite a few of the tributes, and also quite a few of the stunt guys as well, because I really hit it off with um stunt like Samir and Ice in particular are close friends of mine now, but then also amongst the tributes, I see a lot of them about.
What overall message do you hope viewers take away from this movie?
I think this film in particular is I guess I'm coming up at it from the perspective of tributes, because that's kind of what I focused on in terms of my process and everything. Um, yeah, I think what I hope the film teaches us is how we don't want our world to be. I think that's probably the most important thing, and when I don't think we're doing a very good job of as a species in not making our world look a bit like that. Um, there's at the release of the games, obviously, um, there's wars happening across the world, and uh, in particular, the conflict happening in Gaza is something that feels very relevant, like that makes the film feel very relevant, and kind of the conflict and how stories of children being hurt and killed is yeah, it's a tragedy, and I hope that the film uh makes people aware of of how awful humans can sometimes be, and try and make a conscious effort to prevent that future from happening.
It's really like difficult to see the parallels, I'm sure, for you having kind of been through the filming and having it come out, but then also seeing it happen in the real world. So I think like a lot of the choices like we make, it has an impact on society. So it's just making, kind of conscious decisions, and like you mentioned, even things like efforts, kind of second guess what you do, maybe causes that you support, and things like that.
I think yeah, it's a tough it's again it's with the film itself, it's um the characters who do defy the system, they don't survive. So it's a really tough message to be putting out there. Um, at the same time, it's I hope that people can continue to be brave. I hope that it does inspire people, despite that. I think at the same time, I think yeah, I hope it pushes for uh, a desire to understand, a desire to be empathetic, a desire to love, um, and to not pick sides, but uh, make your decisions for yourself. Yeah.
I know that you've received a lot of love on social media since the movie's release, although you're not on it too often. But what have you seen? What kind of messages have you received? Like, what has that support meant to you?
Yeah, the support has been incredible. Yeah, I don't know why, but I never thought that there was a fandom as large as the one that Hunger Games is. I guess it's because I haven't shared spaces with it before. In terms of like an online space. For instance, I watch a lot of One Piece creator content, and I very much understand kind of like I'm very much a part of, I guess, that kind of that fandom, the fandom of anime, the fandom of those stories. And I was really I was blown away by the fact that the Hunger Games had something akin to that, something similar, and that so many of these characters were so loved initially. Again, I'm quite an anxious person, so I feel that um, the initial kind of social media like boom um, did give me anxiety. It was kind of something I wasn't expected, that I didn't expect, and but then kind of taking a moment and seeing the messages, um, it was really lovely. It was yeah, everyone's been very supportive, and some of the drawings as well. So some people who've created some drawings, they're very talented people, and yeah, I guess it means a lot to me that uh, so many people were able to connect with this film, with our performances, with my performance. Um, yeah, it's amazing, and I can only imagine it's um, as kind of similar feelings as I've had towards certain films made and certain adaptations that have been made, and um, yeah, I feel very honored to be a part of that.
Have you seen any of like the TikTok edits, or do you get sent that from any friends and
Yeah,
family?
my friends send them to me, or were sending them to me shortly after the film's release. Um, I'm not personally on TikTok, so it was only through people sending them to me. Um, yeah, they I really enjoyed in particular all of the ones that kind of focus on Lamina and Treech's relationship and their story. But I also enjoyed some of the music choices. I it was yeah there were it was kind of crazy to see, and um I don't know what else to say about it, but
There are dedicated people out there. I mean, seeing your kind of scene packs or whatnot, close-ups of your face, the pop music. I mean, it's something that you don't necessarily expect. So it does come as like, oh, that's new and like a kind of interesting, I'm sure, especially for someone who's not really on social media.
yeah it's yeah I've quite a small presence in social media, and I don't think that's going to change. But yeah, no, it was very strange, but kind of cool at the same time to see to um again the love that those characters had was blew me out the water.
You do what keeps you healthy, and I'm sure your friends will be sending them to you once when they see them. As to kind of round things off here, we did talk about your kind of personal like project directorial debut, but are there any other upcoming projects that you can share?
So yeah, so there's a film called Goldfish, and um it's in a very early stage process of it being made. Um, the director Darius has decided that he's going to do a redraft of the feature film. It began as a short film, which is when I was auditioned and came on board. And since then, he's decided the feature is the best way to kind of tell this story. But it's a queer asexual film where the principal character is asexual, and it's a chance to one kind of explore um, and represent that community that that is underrepresented. There's kind of a lot of it's a very new and mm, new in the sense it's new in terms of its discourse surrounding it is quite new for it to be an opportunity to show East Asian queer romance is something that I'm very excited to share. Um, because we don't there's not many films or that many stories that kind of uh, offer that to audiences. And I think it's incredible to see how many new queer works are being created, and it's definitely something that is very important. Representation in general is something I feel very passionate about. Again, it's in the early stage of development, but hopefully we can, in the not too distant future, we'll be able to bring that forwards to you. And then yeah, with my short film, it's again it's a representational piece focusing on a young Japanese girl. Um, what's particularly exciting for me is it's is that we're going to play with mediums. So it's going to kind of transition between animation, stop motion animation, and live action. So it's a very challenging first directorial debut, but it's something I hope with the team that we've assembled we can pull off a really high quality, and hopefully you guys will be able to see that soon as well.
You're not pulling any punches with your directorial debut with the stop motion. I hope it works out for you. That sounds really interesting, playing with different mediums. Is that something that you always wanted to do, or did it kind of come in the more recent years?
Yeah, I think playing with mediums has been something that I've always wanted to see. I think it's and now that there's I think stop motion in particular is something that is really developed or has been kind of started to be really considered in a very public domain with kind of films like um Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs and uh this isn't a very uh this isn't a very mainstream film, but Junkhead, which is a Japanese stop motion kind of super dystopian film. Um, but stop motion is an awesome, really awesome genre, and I'm glad it's getting the attention and the respect that it's gaining at the moment. Um, but then medium play is something that I've always been fascinated about, and whilst writing this script, I found an opportunity to really play with that. So yeah, I don't really want to say any more about it, but
Give all the secrets
uh,
away. No,
yeah,
you got
yeah,
to
yeah,
keep that for as a surprise
yeah, yeah.
for when it comes out. But all the best of luck with it. I'm
Thank you.
really looking forward to seeing it. I have one more question for you. Our signature question: if you could be any ice cream flavor, which would you be and why?
Well, I'd be an ice cream flavor. My favorite is pistachio, but I don't think I give pistachio energy. Um, I don't know. Lemon sorbet, I'd say. Um, it's quite bitter. Uh, not everyone's cup of tea. But yeah, kind of kicks a punch. Hopefully I try and live with that. Well, that really threw me.
I love that. I like when you have that kind of personal note and element to it. I think that's what kind of makes the question interesting. But that's a good pick, and it's perfect for the summertime as well.
What's what's your ice cream flavor? Who are
I've
you?
I've moved back and forth between, but I usually end up settling on matcha or green tea because of
Right.
like it's has this interesting flavor profile where it can both be bitter and sweet, so it can kind of like fit both. Yeah. And with the Asian, obviously, influence and background. Yeah.
Yeah. No, makes it. That's a better answer than mine for sure.
I've had more time to think about it. That's why I like putting people on the spot. So, I mean, that was such a great way to end things off. Thank you so much for taking the
No,
time.
thank you for having me. Thank you.
For all those watching, you can catch Hiroki in Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It is out now on DVD and streaming on demand, and we will see you next time.